I hope everybody's enjoying the conference so far. We're excited to kick off this first presentation with Katie Sacra, but first we wanted to cover just a few basic housekeeping items. We do have water outside in the hallway. We have water bottles and cups to refill your water if you'd like. And we also invite you to ask questions at the end for a Q&A portion. Simply raise your hand and I'll bring the mic over to you. Now let's welcome Katie Sacra, Director of Operations and Family Programs, Global Foundation for Peroxisomal Disorders. Katie has over 20 years of experience in healthcare administration and 22 years lived experience as a parent and caregiver to her son, TJ. Let's welcome Katie.
Hey, everyone. So I was asked today to talk about self-care for caregivers. And when I was thinking about how do I create this presentation, when really I should be showing up and telling everyone that they should pack up their bags and go back to their room and take a nap, because self-care is really hard. And I thought I really should be providing y'all with self-care and just go read a book, take a nap, take a walk, whatever, is self-care for you. But I don't think the organizers would go for that. So we're going to talk about self-care, and hopefully I will not put you to sleep. So as she shared, I'm Katie Sacra, and I am first and foremost mom to TJ. TJ is a 22-year-old he's very determined. He is living with a rare genetic disease called a peroxisomal disorder. It's a peroxisomal biogenesis disorder in the Zellweger spectrum. As I'm sure many of you know, we all have some lengthy alphabetical soup titles. And so he's living with this disease that's typically fatal in early childhood. He has a disease that is multi-system, so it impacts his entire body. There's not an area of his body that is not impacted by this disease. I'm also Director of Operations and Family Programs for the GFPD. And I put this quote on here that I really can't see very well, so I'm going to walk over here. And it talks about one of the most important things you can do on this earth is to let people know that they are not alone. And that's really how I ended up in this role. I'm someone who just believes this to my core. My mission is to help other families not feel alone as we walk this path of rare disease. I went over 10 years without having an organization to go to. I know how important it is to come together like all of you are right now. We just did this with our organization in June. So this just really sums up in one how I came to be in this role. So I'd love to learn a little bit about all of you before we move on. And I'd love just a quick show of hands of who in the room is a parent to an individual with a rare disease or a serious illness. I think that's almost all of you. Do we have any extended family members? Extended family members? And how about caregivers? And exactly, that's the trick question. So I noticed in the last few years that we don't identify a lot of times when we're parents as caregivers. So everyone that raised their hand as a parent, when you're asked if you're a caregiver, you should be raising your hand too. And I know I struggled with, what is a caregiver? Am I? And even the definition alone can be really complicated. I know when I Googled it even and thought, I want to talk about what a caregiver is. How do we talk about self-care if we don't know what a caregiver even is? There are a lot of different definitions. And so I picked this one because it's pretty general. Caregiver is a general term referring to anyone who provides care for a person who needs extra help. Notice I chose one that didn't talk about the training that's involved. I didn't pick one that talked about if you were paid or not. And that's because when you go through and you look for the definition of a caregiver, some people are going to talk about being a paid caregiver and all of the different training. And I guarantee most of us in this room have learned on our own and we're not being paid for it. So when I was working with the National Alliance for Caregivers on their collaborative, we had a working group during the pandemic to try to provide access, vaccine access to caregivers. And that's when I really stopped and said, wow, this definition is important. And this is needed. We were really struggling. We were challenged with writing a definition to help educate other people on what a caregiver is, to make sure that we family unpaid caregivers are being recognized. So this is really important. And I just wanted to do that quick exercise just to kind of share how many of us, including myself for a very long time, didn't recognize my own self as a caregiver. My friend and colleague, Dr. Mosimi Bose, actually has done a lot of work over the years. I don't know if you've read any of her research, but she has done a lot of work in the caregiver, the rare disease caregiver, the experience, the toll that it takes. And I was able to participate in one of her studies, and that's what really helped me even realize I'm a caregiver. But when it really, yes, Dr. Mosimi Bose, B-O-S-E, and she's with Montclair University. And she helped me realize that I was a caregiver. But when it really hit me was when my son turned 18, when you're sitting in that courtroom and the judge is appointing you and your husband as co-guardians. But it wasn't just me. When TJ turned 18, I realized that other people started to view me as a caregiver as well. The perception shifted when it was a choice. So that was very interesting to me. So I just think it's important that we talk about the definition and remember that we need others to recognize us in this role. This is just a quick few facts about general caregivers. I wanted to just cover this really quickly before we dove into what self-care is and why it's needed. So NAC, National Alliance for Caregivers, and ARP put out a report periodically. And this report is widely regarded as one of the most authoritative resources available on American caregivers. And so here are just a few of the facts. You have 39% that are men, 61% that are women. You have family caregivers now encompass more than 1 in 5 Americans. We are definitely not alone. There are a lot of us. 23% of Americans say caregiving has made their health worse. Sharing that obviously because we need to talk about self-care and supporting caregivers. And then over here on the right side of the screen, you can see that the difference is in just 5 years. More family caregivers report their own health is fair to poor. More family caregivers have difficulty coordinating care, and more Americans are caring for more than one individual at a time. And so the previous slide was about general caregivers. And I noticed when I was looking into it that a lot of the individuals that were included in that information were above the age of 18, or the caregivers were not caring for their own child. And so I dug a little bit more and wanted to be able to share about the rare disease caregiver, because while we don't want to minimize any caregiver role, they're all hard, they all come with their own challenges, we have to acknowledge that the rare disease caregiver is a different experience. And so rare caregivers' emotional stress is about twice as high as that of general caregivers. That alone shows you that we have a different experience. The other difference that I noticed was that a lot of rare caregivers are immediate family members. So in other populations, if you will, we see of a bigger array. So in the rare disease community, it's immediate family members. So who are these caregivers, these rare disease caregivers? 59% of them are providing care to their own child under the age of 18. 17%, just like my husband and I, are providing care to a child above the age of 18. 14% a spouse, partner, and then so on. You can see that the numbers just really come down. So in the rare disease community, caregivers are really parents of children. So what does the rare disease caregiver role look like? And I think that we all know that the real question is, what isn't involved in the role of it? And I see like, yes, this is what isn't. So a year ago today, as crazy as that is, thank you, Facebook Memories. A year ago today, I presented on a webinar for the launch of the guidebook that you see on the bottom left. I know you can't see this table of contents. It's there just for a visual, because when I was going through the guidebook, I wrote the welcome for it. So I'm going through it and I'm writing this welcome and I'm realizing how many people contributed to this book. It's amazing. It's this incredible resource, but there's so much in it and it's great information. But the collaboration that it took to write this book and how many people were involved, high level people just taking their time out. And then I looked at this table of contents and I thought, at any time, one caregiver is expected to know all of this information. We are navigating a path for so many of these different areas. And so that really hit me. And I made sure that I shared that to say, I think this book should be shared with other people, not just caregivers. Let's help educate others about our experience. But I just wanted to share that because I thought, people ask about the caregiver role and I say, wait a minute, what's not involved? It's so much. And this just really shows a really quick picture of how much it is. So what does that mean for some of us? The work we do puts us at increased risk for depression, anxiety, burnout. If you see down below, it talks about how people will superheroes. Not superhuman, that we are human and that we can burn out. I love this graphic because it shows that battery just, it's just losing its power. And it's because of all of these things that we're trying to do. So we need to remember that burnout, we don't have to wait for that to happen. We need to recognize, what does burnout look like for us? And that's not going to be the same for every single person. Is it exhaustion? Is it self-doubt, negativity, bitterness, feeling detached? And sometimes we need to talk to a professional and have them help us figure it out, because when you figure out what the symptoms of burnout look like, we can have a plan in place to get ahead of it and to get back on track. But I think the biggest message here is, don't wait to be burned out. So the caregiver toll. Chronic stress, we talk about that a lot. What is it? It's stress that we endure over a long period of time. It's also something that will impact our life. It will impact our future health. It influences our immune, metabolic, and cardiovascular systems. Knowing that knows it's going to impact our health. It's not a if, it's a when. Family caregivers have a 33% higher risk of future illness and disability compared to non-caregivers. In previously disease-free groups, 24% of carers compared to 16.5% of non-carers reported having chronic health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, asthma in a follow-up report in 2019. This is showing us how much it really does take a toll. Again, it's not if, it's when. So we talked about caregivers and its toll, but why does this matter? Because this sounds really negative, I'm sure. We're like, great, this is what's coming. No, we can get ahead of this. We can. We're going to talk about that today, I promise. But we have to talk about the impact it has to really understand why we have to have self-care in our lives. So it matters because caregivers play a crucial role in facilitating care. Our ability to care for others relies on our health. It relies on our self-care because self-care is going to impact our health. I know all too well the horrific feeling of not being able to take care of my son. Last February, I woke up very early in the morning and I couldn't get my balance. I couldn't function and I was crawling. I was holding onto the floor. It was something I hope no one has ever experienced, but I'll tell you what is a worse feeling is realizing that I couldn't take care of my son. This went on for a month. I couldn't drive. It was a very slow healing process. I felt so helpless. My therapist and my doctors really felt that this was stress that contributed to the onset of this. Lesson learned. I could do a presentation on everything not to do. So Caregivers have insight on care coordination with multiple specialists. Caregivers' stress can affect health-related outcomes and disease management. How many in this room have educated the healthcare professionals about their child's disease? How many in this room have even just educated them about their child, period? Not even about the disease, just about their child. 89% educate professionals. Staff provide constant care. And almost all of us provide medical and nursing tasks. These are all things that will be impacted if we don't take care of ourselves. So what is self-care? We've covered caregivers, the toll of caregiving, how our health can have a direct impact on our loved ones. But what is self-care? In one way, I found it's defined as a multidimensional, multifaceted process of purposeful engagement and strategies that promote healthy functioning and enhance well-being. What does that mean? Self-care is really, we're building resilience towards the stressors in our life that we can't eliminate. And I know all of us have those stressors. We can't eliminate the stressors, but we can find ways to live with them. Self-care is more than finding ways to relax. It's physical. How are we sleeping? How is our diet? How are we eating? Are we getting enough exercise? It's social. And everybody has different social needs. Some people are great to hop on a Zoom and chat with others. Some people need face-to-face. So in the last few years, it's really impacted a lot of individuals, not just caregivers. So just remember that when we talk about social, it's definitely going to be very different for different people. Mental. What is mentally stimulating to you? And I know me, I said earlier, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to learn. But this isn't the stuff we have to learn. The things that are related to our caregiving that we know we have to learn. What do you enjoy? Take some time out and actually learn about something that you love, that you want to learn about, not that you have to. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's doing a puzzle. You can find things that are mentally stimulating to you. It's also spiritual. And when we say spiritual, remember, this does not have to be religious. For me, especially after last year, I brought back meditation into my life, even if it's just for 1 minute a day, being able to stop, be mindful, and center myself. So it doesn't always have to be religious, which a lot of people think when they hear the spiritual side. Emotional. How do you process your emotions? These are all things that you can do on your own, or you can meet with a professional to try to help you find out, how do I do this? And just stopping, taking a moment, and even that in itself is self-care. Being able to stop and acknowledge, what are these things for me? So on this next slide, you see the picture up on the top right, and I have a feeling a lot of people are very familiar with this analogy. We've probably all seen it, but I think that's because it's so true. Maybe some of you flew here and you heard the flight attendant remind you that if you're putting your oxygen mask on in an emergency, who puts it on first? You do. And why is that? You can't take care of anybody else unless you have it on you. You're going to be unconscious. You can't help anybody else. So we see this all the time, but it's really powerful and it's very true. So I couldn't not share that. So self-care is not selfish. It's an absolute necessity. And I think that picture really just spells that out for us. And I did not mean to do that. So we need to think of ourselves as part of the care plan. So when we always talk about our child's care and we talk about our child's, plan of care, where do we fit into that? Because if we don't fit into it, we're not going to be able to continue that plan and execute it successfully. Our wellness impacts the ability to care for our child. If I don't place the oxygen mask on, I can't provide the care. We are no good to the person needing care if we end up needing care ourselves. Look at me last February. It took a lot of people. Thankfully, we had that support system to come in and take care of me. It wasn't just me not being able to take care of my son. I actually required care for a few of those weeks. So I'm going to share a short video next. It is of a really good friend and fellow rare disease mom, and she just talks a little bit about this. There's also the guilt, I think, and the judgment that comes with doing self-care, and she really touches on that as well. And we had a little bit of a hiccup with the slide in the video, so I'm going to let them start that in the back.
As long as my son is taken care of and he's okay, we also need to take time for ourselves, me and my husband together and as individuals. You know, you want to be able to feel good for yourself and take care of yourself so then you can take care of your child. You can't do everything that your friends are doing. You can't always go out, but there are times where you can. It helps me. It's like therapy for me in a sense where I get out, because that way, if something happens with Elijah, I'm focused. If he feels me down and out, that's how he's gonna feel. Now, if I feel strong and and I'm okay, he'll be okay. And that's always how it's been. When I was younger, I got judged and criticized for still going out, still trying to find a balance. I was like, don't judge a book by its cover. The advice that I would give some of the families or anyone out in the world is ask questions before judging. Educate yourself so that way you can understand a family and their situation.
And so if you guys heard her say she knows that self-care helps her, she can better focus when she has self-care. And I love how she recommends others to ask questions and to become educated, because I don't think other people really realize how much of a break we need. And maybe if they knew the self-care that we do need and how important it is, they would actually be a better support system for us. So I really think that in that short clip, she addresses so many important issues in her experience. Of course, it wants to play for me this time. And so another saying that a lot of us have probably heard is, you can't pour from an empty cup. And again, it's because it's very true. We have to understand what feeds us. Is it exercise? Is it rest? Is it eating healthy? Is it meditation? Is it sleep? Is it one or more of these? Is it something I didn't even list here? We need to be able to stop and think about what energizes us. We need to not keep trying to avoid burnout. We need to recognize what feeds us, what fills up the cup, so that we can keep filling the cup up so that it doesn't get empty. Those of us who know the human body know well that once you become thirsty, your body's already dehydrated. And so if we think about that and we look at this analogy, then we know that we have to keep putting water in that cup or we're going to find ourselves burnt out. And there are several ways for us in our busy, hectic lives to find self-care. So let's be real though. What works for you? This looks fantastic, right? Some may not be beachgoers. I love the beach. I live at the beach. But this requires vacation for most people. And that's not really practical. It's a great self-care, go on vacation, but is that going to sustain you? Is that going to last all year long or twice a year if you're able to do that? No, but meditation might, so you can take yourself there in your mind. Maybe not the beach, maybe the mountains, maybe a lake, maybe wherever is peaceful for you. You can do this every day. You can do this right now. Maybe you love playing golf, but maybe you just want to take a walk. These are all things that we can incorporate into our life that are self-care. When was the last time we went to the eye doctor for ourselves? I am really behind on this myself. Trying to get a massage has been really stressful for me. Others, this may be something that you can do, and it's self-care. Reading a good book, having your favorite cup of coffee or tea. When was the last time we went for a physical and took care of ourselves? If you notice, there's some really great activities, but there's also taking care of ourselves because that is part of self-care. We need to think about what's practical. And for me during the pandemic, that was Instacarting cake to myself to celebrate getting through the weeks that we were getting through. I did this. I can't say that it's a healthy choice for self-care, but for me, it made me really happy in that moment. So I couldn't help but share a very realistic self-care item that I chose. But I will follow it up and say we need to eat healthy. And that is part of filling that cup up and making sure that we're energized and that we can keep going. Because it's a marathon, not a sprint. We all have really busy lives. So how do we prioritize this? I know for me and many others, we just keep pushing through and pushing through. We just keep doing and doing and doing. But eventually it will catch up to you. So what is important to you? Do you have a routine? Does your routine allow for things that strengthen you? We need to prioritize what recharges us, what fills up our cup. And being able to prioritize self-care is going to look different for everyone. One way that I will suggest that may not work for everyone is going to be to look at your calendar, whether it be your day agenda in the morning, if it's too overwhelming to look at the whole week, but if you can, look at the entire week and look at it and see if you have prioritized yourself. What does that schedule look like? Do you see your priorities in this week's schedule? Do you value yourself? You should, on that list to the right of values and priorities, we're going to have lots of appointments. We're going to have our child. We're going to have taking care of the house. We're going to have bills. We're going to have all of these things, but we need to prioritize and make sure that we are writing ourselves in. And if that means actually taking the appointment scheduler and writing your name in and writing a time and writing 3 minutes even, that is how you prevent burnout. So seasons of self-care. Self-care not only looks different for different people, it's likely going to change throughout time. I know for myself, my son is now 22 years old. And so I know that even being a mom to him and caregiving for him, there are a lot of different seasons that I've been through. Those first few years, I felt one way, and then a few years later, I felt another. My needs are going to change as well. So our child's abilities may change. That's going to change the type of self-care that we need. Our support system may change, whether that be less support, more support, policy change, being able to provide more benefits. All of these things are going to contribute to your needs changing. So don't be afraid to revisit what works for you. So examples of self-care. I asked a few caregivers in the rare disease community that I'm with if they were willing to share their examples of what self-care looks like for them. And I said, I want to share this with some other rare disease caregivers. And I want to see if maybe it will help them. And so they shared these examples with me that I'm going to share. But what was interesting is just how different they were also. And that they also weren't daily necessarily. They really did vary. I cannot really see these well. I'm going to try, but we're just going to roll through a few of these. When our special three, this is a friend of mine that I'm very close with actually, and she said, when my three were young, I vacationed twice a year alone. That's amazing. Did that sustain her for the whole year? Yes. I don't think that would sustain me for the whole year. I don't know. I've never done it, but it worked for her. And that's what's important, is finding what works for you. That may not be practical also. So remember, we're talking about being practical and what's realistic. Another one, taking a vacation, going away without the kids. Having family support network. So if you look at this one alone, she's talking about her the social impact, the social needs. She needs that network. You may find it even within your community of rare disease caregivers that you've met here. You may find it in a good friend. So just making sure that you have your supportive people that you can talk to. She also started boxing classes, which is not the first mom in the rare disease community that has done this. I love it. But think about this, she's meeting her physical needs. So just in this one sentence, she's meeting her social needs and she's also meeting her physical needs on a regular basis. Going to therapy weekly, being able to talk to somebody, again, social, emotional, mental. Somebody else said cleaning, just having a clean surface. Cleaning does not sound like self-care to me, but it does for this person. And that's the beauty of finding what works for you. Right now, just showering is her goal. And we all know that sometimes it gets really crazy. And if that's what your self-care is, then that's what your self-care is. There's no judgment. It's what works for you. Taking a 30-minute walk outside with her child. That's what she enjoys. Getting that physical activity, getting out of the house. Again, social, finding someone they can talk to. They recommend it not being a family member. This one is a dad who shared that him and his wife, one day a month, they provide the other one with the opportunity to go and engage in some activity by themselves one day a month. They said sometimes it doesn't always work out, but when it does, they said it's amazing. Another turns up music and dances, and the kids, it's a family activity that they can do. Social, physical. You see a lot of that combination together. And then another one tag teams with their husband in the way that they're caring for the children and the family while she takes a walk with the dogs. So these are just all examples, and you can see where some are pretty spread out and some aren't. You have to find what works for you. So I'd love for everyone in the room today, I invite you to right now stop and close your eyes. Make sure both feet are flat on the floor. This is that time where you can picture the beach or not if it's not peaceful for you. Allow your body and mind to find comfort. Relax your shoulders. Are they pulling up from your ears? Soften them and let them pull away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. And go ahead and take a nice deep breath and inhale through your nose. And pay attention to the air moving through your nose and down your throat. And exhale through your mouth. And let's do that again. A nice big inhale. And exhale. And one more time. Inhale. And exhale. And you can slowly open your eyes and realize that you can do this anywhere at any time and bring this back to you. It doesn't have to be the vacation by yourself, although that sounds amazing. We can just stop and pay attention to ourselves. Remember taking the time even to think about what fills us up. What are our signals that burnout is approaching and that maybe I need to revisit what re-energizes me. So tips for self-care. Always bring it back to you. Choose ways to care for yourself physically, emotionally, and mental. Make sure you're just always bringing it back to you. I say keep it simple. And that's because I think that a lot of us will try to say, I need to do self-care and make it a project. And we make it a task in a way that becomes stressful. And this should not be stressful. I recently decided that we had a big rare disease conference as well. We had a family and scientific conference in June. There was 300 of us that got together. And I thought beforehand, a friend of mine and we were going to get our nails done. I had not gotten my nails done in years. I thought I'm going to get my nails done. And I went, and it was the most horrible experience. It was so stressful, including the owner having to stay after hours to fix what had been done. So it was a really bad experience. After the conference, I thought, we're going to go get massages. 3 of us had this planned. We had it set, all 3 of us. And right away, I should have known that my self-care was not going to be a good self-care experience when they said, we only have 3 masseuses at 9 a.m. I'm not a morning person. So we show up, we make childcare arrangements, nursing arrangements, and we all go and we get there and they have none of us on their list. They had a complete computer crash. I said, you know what, if we can't have our massages, we're going to have our carbs. Let's go to my favorite donut place. My friend's car gets hit in the parking lot. Cannot make this up. self-care can be stressful. Don't let it be. In that moment, we couldn't have prevented a lot of that, but we should have known even when we were scheduling it, that was already going to be stressful. So don't add to your plate when you're trying to have self-care. So self-care won't make the stressors go away. We have to remember that these stressors are things that we have to live with. Self-care is what will help us be able to provide better care for our loved ones. And I think that's my biggest takeaway, is to know that we have to be able to take care of there's something flying. We have to be able to take care of our loved ones. And we can't do that unless we find ways to keep filling the cup up. And we have to know that this is not, I know myself, even in the past, I wasn't a big believer in self-care. And I hope that if anything today, you have learned that self-care doesn't have to be something big. It shouldn't be stressful. Vacations are great, but it doesn't have to be a vacation. It doesn't have to be a scheduled massage. It can be small little things that we do for ourselves, from making sure that we're going to the doctor and we're taking care of ourselves, making sure that we're drinking enough water. Set an alarm on your phone if you need to throughout the day to say, where am I at with drinking my water? We get so busy that we forget to eat healthy ourselves. We may do meal prep and we've blended food diets for our children, and yet we're inhaling something that's completely not healthy. So taking that time to do food prep for ourselves, these are all ways that are self-care. So keep it simple. That's my biggest recommendation. Here are a few resources I wanted to share that I know that are just really important to me. And I thought we aren't going to touch on this today. It's a very short amount of time. So I just wanted to be able to share this, and I can make sure that my slides are available as well if anyone would like to have them for some of these resources, including, I see there's a few men in the room. There are resources for male caregivers, respite. I know a lot of places do not have funding for or benefits through your state, even your health insurance company may not cover respite care. We all deserve this. NORD actually has a program that you can apply for and will help you get respite care. The National Alliance for Caregivers, who you've heard me talk a lot about, if you want to get involved in advocacy, they're a fantastic group. And here is a QR code if you'd love to read the guidebook that I've mentioned a few times. Chapter 10 is all about self-care. You can, I'm going to share my slides, but you can raise your phone now if you'd like and grab that QR code, and it will take you right to the book so that you can have access to it today if you want to start taking a look at it. And thank you so much for having me today. Does anybody have any questions? And if you don't have questions, I would love to hear anybody who has tried self-care, has a self-care experience. I know our community, when I asked them, would you be willing to share some of your self-care to share with some other rare disease caregivers? They actually got really excited and started sharing more and more and saying, I love hearing what other people are doing. It gave me great idea to do this or this. And even if it's something you've tried and it didn't work, it may work for someone else. So even if you don't have a question, being able to just share with one another some of your self-care activities. Social. So you have a social need that you're meeting right there. I don't know if everyone heard her. She goes, you said once or twice a week. That's amazing to be able to go and have coffee with a girlfriend and just, she said, complain about different things. And that's what we need to do. We need to vent. And that's exactly what one of our own families with our rare disease community shared too, that she does. She said, I think it's great to not have it be a family member. And so having somebody that you can vent with that doesn't judge you, you're having your social, you're able to probably talk and process different emotions. So I can see where that's so helpful, and it's realistic, it's practical. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to share? Right back there.
One thing I've learned and everything is that when we have a special needs child at home, and me and my wife work opposite schedules. I work a 7 to 7 and mainly work at night. Now, what I didn't realize at first was that when I am home, I tried to be, always available to my wife and to my child. I didn't realize, I was pretty much, like denying myself. I guess, with me always being, with me being gone part of the month and part of the time, I felt guilty when I do come home. I gotta be there for them. I gotta do for them. They're here basically 24/7. Taking care, handling things until I come home, and then I just take it on, by myself. When I go to work, that's like my time. Because I primarily work by myself. I do radiology in the hospital. So at night it's just me. I handle the whole department by myself, and that, I guess, that's my time. To just be me, myself, and I would say, I have my own little activities that I do when I'm not engaged with a patient. So I guess for me, going to work, strange as it sounds, is my self-care.
So my husband actually, who is along on this trip because we're originally from Maryland and we're gonna stay and visit some family. He's in the back of the room and he is nodding constantly. So my husband is a fireman and he works shift work. And so for a lot of years, he worked shift work. And so we worked shifting schedules with taking care of our son. And so I know that he can relate. If you'd like to meet him and talk, he joked actually and said that we should co-present on this topic. So maybe that will be part 2 in the future, because finding that balance and making sure that everybody, all caretakers' needs are met could be an entire different presentation even. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't know that work is a good self-care. I would say that what I did hear you say that I'm not sure you even heard maybe is that you have moments when you're not providing patient care that maybe you're doing something else that you are able to have a little bit of downtime. I'm not sure if that's accurate, if you're typing, you're doing reports, but is that what I heard?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll read some things. Read articles or catch up on stuff that I like to do. I do like to read. I like to work with music and stuff. There's quite a few things. I can actually do on my downtime when I'm not engaged with patients. That for me, is kind of my self-care. Work out. I have time. To quickly get in like 20 or 30 push-ups. Or get in that 50 set of crunches. Then go on to the next patient.
I think that's fantastic. So I would say work is not your self-care. You're finding moments throughout your really busy schedule, whether it be at work or not. It happens to be at work for you, but you're working these longer shifts and it's a little bit different than some people. So that's just showing another opportunity. Careers are different. So you may be able to work that in when you're at work. And so I love that you shared that. And I hear that you are finding moments to prioritize yourself throughout your work day even. Another thing though that I want to touch on, I don't know if you're doing this, but I heard a little bit of it and it reminded me of my own situation and my family. And that is where one partner may be working a little bit more outside the home and they come home and they're not around as much because of shift work, and they come home and they feel guilty. And so they want to try to provide. And it could go either direction. They could just not want to, they may need to shut down, but they may want to take care of them. They may want to come home and take care of their partner, take care of all of the kids. And then they're not having any downtime for themselves. So I really feel like working with your partner, there was the one recommendation on the bottom, that one example that was showing where the couple tag teamed and she took the dog for a walk. I don't know if you remember seeing that on the bottom of the screen. So that is going to be something that has to take place too when there's more than one caregiver, is making sure that you're communicating what your needs are. So we have to identify them for ourselves because one partner may have very different needs. You're getting that physical workout and you said music and learning and reading. Your partner may feel completely different and not want to do any of those things. So making sure that you identify what fills your cup up and then communicating that with the other person who's helping you provide the care to the person who needs it, making sure you both are able to have the time to fill your cup up because both of you need that.
I don't know if there's an easy answer for this, but I'm curious your recommendations and just your personal experience with rare disease communities. The social component of connecting with others is usually through social media and the Facebook groups and that kind of thing. And do you have any advice for families where on one hand, you're really seeking that community with people who really understand. On the other hand, you're also then immersing yourself in potentially constant information about medical emergencies, and it almost like re-triggers trauma for you
Mhm.
by having that social component. So I don't know if
Yes.
you have any advice.
So that is where I would actually look to the rare disease community leaders, to the organizations that are supporting the families. And so as Director of Family Programs, I'm happy to talk with anybody at other organizations and share a little bit about things that we do to provide that support, because I completely agree. We have a disease that it's a spectrum, but the severity of it, it's fatal in early childhood. So we've actually had support calls where somebody showed up and their child had just passed 2 days beforehand. That is a heavy emotional call that is triggering for a lot of people. So yes, if you're trying to fill your cup and have a social experience, that may not be the best choice, because that could really leave you feeling very drained instead of rejuvenated. And so I would look to the leaders of the organizations to make sure that they're providing opportunities that speak to an array of people. So we even have what we call GFPD Family Fridays. We have Saturday support. Those are drop-in type events. And so those are more fun. We tell everybody there's no agenda, go ahead and wear your comfy clothes, pour a glass of whatever you enjoy, come and just gather with your village, come and just connect with others. And as a facilitator, again, this is going to go back to the leadership of the organization or whoever's hosting that support event. We need to be able to facilitate, make sure that you have people in those rooms, in those spaces that are, one, a trustworthy person, and two, trained in facilitating, so that they can see if somebody's monopolizing the situation. That person, I guarantee you, doesn't mean to come in and monopolize. They don't mean to drain everybody. They're there because they need support. So that facilitator will know how to handle that. They're going to be able to redirect, make sure that person gets the support they need, maybe off of that call or outside of that call. They may all of a sudden spontaneously, if they have enough facilitators, to make the decision to go into breakout spaces and pull that person in with a few of the people that they know are able and have the energy to give that person the support they need, and allow other people to be able to just talk about the weather, or what's your favorite outfit, or anything that you can think of, your favorite recipe. So I really think that comes back to the leaders and the people who are organizing that support.
Hello. So not my question, but for someone from online.
Mhm.
You talked about how sharing the caregiver roles book with others would help. What are some ways friends and colleagues or others can help care for the caregiver? That makes sense. One more time. You talked about how sharing the caregiver roles book with others would help. What are some ways friends and colleagues can help for the caregiver?
So I actually love this question. When I, a year ago, spoke about the guidebook that I had shared, everyone talked about what a great resource it was for caregivers. And I said, while it was, I thought, caregivers, the last thing we really want is another piece of paper to read. And so I really wanted to see this guidebook get placed in the hands of family members, of professionals, no matter what professional role that may be, whether it be a social worker, a doctor, a nurse, a physical therapist, it doesn't matter. I think anybody who is engaging with someone who's a caregiver, which if you look at the statistics, 1 in 5 are a caregiver in the US alone, then pretty much everyone is. So we need to make sure that other people are reading these resources, because when we're in the thick of it, when we're in a hospital room, when we're sitting there taking care of our child, having somebody else be able to say, hey, I read this resource and there's something that can help you. We didn't have to read it. We didn't have to know about it. We have so much. Remember the table of contents alone. That is so much information. And when we're really stressed out and we are not getting the sleep we need, and we're sitting there taking care of our child, if somebody else could have read that book and been able to say, hey, here's a resource, or this is the way that I can help, then that's how I would answer that, is to say they need to educate themselves so that they can find ways. They also need to ask. I think when you pass by many of us and say, let me know if you need anything, that's not really helpful. I mean, how many of us have had that happen to us? And do we actually reach out? So this is kind of a catch-22 a little bit. We need to be better about asking for help, but others need to realize that we're not really good at it. And a lot of times when, as you saw this statistically, we are parents that are doing this. So we're mom and we're dad. I feel like this is our job. So there's a lot that we put on our own selves to not ask for help. We shouldn't have to ask for help to take care of our child. I think there's something there as well. So just being able to recognize that we need help and asking for help, but then the outsiders, educating yourselves, finding the resources, stepping in and saying, here, I made you dinner, not passing by and saying, what can I do? Let me know if you need help. Actually offer and say, I'm going to do one of these things. And maybe list out and say, I can do this, or I can do this, you choose. And let them choose a way. But making sure that you're communicating with them and it's actually something that's going to be helpful as well.
We have a second question. How do you personally manage your to-do list versus time for what makes you prevent burnout?
So for me, I really think boundaries, which is something another entire presentation. I didn't mention it and I probably should have today, and that's setting boundaries for myself. And that is something that, just like we have to revisit and take our own temperature in a way of saying, how am I doing? And check in and say, how is my cup? Am I thirsty? Is it empty? And making sure we fill it. We also need to, we just have to make sure that we're asking for help and that we're putting ourselves first and that we're saying no when we need to say no. Because when other people see us managing all of this, remember that slide about people think we're superheroes. No, we're not superhuman. We are human, and being able to manage the amount that we do, I think a lot of people look at us and think, oh, they're going to have the answer. How many of us probably get a lot of people that come to us, and it's a huge compliment. They come to us and they say, how do I do this? Or how do I do that? Or can you help me with this? But every time we say yes to that person, are we saying no to ourselves? So being able to really just set those boundaries and say, I am a priority. Looking ahead at your schedule. It's hard to do. But that is self-care. Actually taking the step, looking at your calendar, making sure that you are in there. If you can't find room for you, then we need to reevaluate. What are we doing? Do we need to tell somebody no? Do we need to ask that other person who just maybe said, let me know if there's anything I can do to help? Maybe they can do something. They need to take something off that needs to happen so that we can take 5 minutes for ourselves.
Any other questions?
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Kathy. I'm a mom to a daughter with special needs with set BP1. So I don't know if you covered this because I had to step out for a minute or two. But so there's care for the caregiver. But if you're both caregivers, I think there's a third component, which maybe you covered, but like caring for the couple also, like caring for the couple as an entity. I think there's 3 issues and I don't know how to balance those. One is caring for self-care, one is caring for the couple, and one is caring for the other siblings who have needs other than being a sister or brother of a special needs kid. And yet, granted, she gets the majority of the parental time and energy. And how do we balance that with taking care of the other kids and their needs for care? So I don't know if you have any recommendations, but
Yeah, thank you for that question. And you're absolutely right. And I'm not sure if you may have missed it, but we did talk a little bit about, like, we could be an entire other presentation even on absolute need for partners being able to support one another as a couple and individually. So that's definitely something that has been brought up and does need attention. Regarding the siblings, I'm a SIB shop facilitator. I don't know if anyone's familiar with SIB shops. It gets a little bit off from self-care for caregivers, but it doesn't, because if you think about it, I didn't have the stats today, but that is an entire other situation. There are children that are caregivers as well. But for siblings, I would suggest going to the Sibling Support Network, if you haven't looked there before, and checking out to see if there's any SIB shops in your area. It's something even that the patient disease organizations can look into and train people to provide for families as part of their family support programming. SIB shops is an incredible resource for siblings of individuals who have disabilities, chronic illnesses. SIB shops is something that we started providing only a year ago because we realized that if we're providing family support, we need to be providing support to the entire family. And so siblings, research has shown, actually mirror a similar experience to their parents. And we parents, we can't imagine. I said at the very beginning that I went over 10 years without having an organization to go to, families to go to, a doctor that even knew what my son's disease was. I don't want anybody to feel isolated. And so if we make sure that we parents have support, and research shows that the siblings are mirroring our experience, we need to make sure that our siblings are having that connection and having that support too. So when it comes to the siblings, I would definitely look into SIB shops. And they are offering that virtually as well.